Hey everyone, it's your family doctor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about something that's incredibly common, yet so many people suffer in silence with because, well, it feels a little embarrassing to bring up. I'm talking about hemorrhoids, whether you have internal hemorrhoids, external hemorrhoids, or mixed, whether yours are still small and manageable or have gotten really large and painful. I want to share with you an approach that has been used for generations. This is something that, when you use it properly, can bring you real soothing relief. And the best part, it doesn't just mask the symptoms for a little while, it gets to the underlying issue so you can finally move on from this problem that may have been bothering you for years. Have you ever felt like this? Just think about it for a second. When a hemorrhoid flares up, that pain, it's relentless. You can't sit, you can't stand, and even lying down to rest doesn't help. Your whole mood just gets irritable and tense. You're just uncomfortable in your own skin. And for some of you, it's more than just pain, it's the bleeding. Every time you go to the bathroom, you have to strain, and when you look down, the water in the toilet bowl is bright red. That image can be really frightening, especially if you're not expecting it, and for those with more advanced cases, the hemorrhoid may prolapse and get stuck outside. Swollen so much that it won't go back in, the pain gets worse, and even walking becomes a struggle. Every single step is pure misery, the physical suffering and the emotional stress that come with this. Honestly, if you haven't been through it, you can't fully understand how hard it is. But here's the good news, everyone. In the clinical experience of traditional medicine, hemorrhoids are actually a very, very treatable condition. Whether you choose to take internal herbal formulas to rebalance your system or use acupuncture to open up the energy channels and relieve pain, the results are often remarkable. And these methods work for adults and children, men and women, with very little to no side effects, as long as they're tailored to your specific pattern. Many of my patients are genuinely surprised. They can't believe that a problem that's been bothering them for years can start to resolve so naturally. So, how does traditional medicine view hemorrhoids in the first place? The core concept is that hemorrhoids are mainly caused by what we call damp heat moving downward into the lower intestines. What does damp heat mean? Let me break it down simply. In our bodies, we have different states: cold, heat, deficiency, excess. Qi, blood, yin, yang in a healthy state. All of these are in a dynamic balance and flow smoothly through our system. But if in your daily life you eat a lot of spicy, greasy, fried, or heavily processed foods, or if you drink too much alcohol because of social gatherings or personal habits, all of these things can generate what we call heat in the body. On top of that, modern life is stressful: work, family, relationships. All that pressure can leave you feeling tense and emotionally stuck. In traditional medicine, we call this liver qi stagnation. When your qi gets stuck, your body's energy doesn't flow smoothly, and that stagnation can also generate heat. Now, if this heat combines with a pre-existing weakness, particularly what we call spleen deficiency, then you have another factor at play. The spleen in this system is responsible for transporting and transforming. Basically, it takes the food and fluids you consume and turns them into nutrients and energy you can use, while also getting rid of excess moisture. If the spleen is weak, it can't do that job properly. Moisture or dampness builds up in the body. When that dampness combines with the heat we just talked about, it forms what we call damp heat, a sticky, heavy, toxic kind of energy. And here's the key: damp heat has a very clear tendency. It moves downward in the body. Why? Because in this system, dampness is heavy and tends to sink, while heat tends to rise. But when they combine, the dampness is heavier. So overall, this damp heat will sink and move down. Where does it go? It follows your energy channels and your digestive tract all the way down to the small intestine, then to the large intestine, and eventually it settles right at the very end, the anal area, over time. This damp heat accumulates there, causing your qi and blood to stagnate, and that's what forms the swollen, painful veins we call hemorrhoids. So you see, in this approach, we don't just look at the symptom in isolation. We look at the whole picture. Hemorrhoids show up in the anal area, but the real root of the problem is in the lower intestines with that damp heat. If you go to a surgeon and they just remove the lump at the opening, that's like picking the fruit from a tree. But if the damp heat, the tree's roots, is still there, it's still going to send more damp heat downward. And it's still going to accumulate at the anal area. As long as your basic constitution hasn't changed and the damp heat hasn't been cleared, your hemorrhoids will come back. This is why so many patients who have surgery find their hemorrhoids recurring a few months or a couple of years later, and sometimes they come back even worse. It's because the root problem was never addressed. So to really treat hemorrhoids, we need to go to the source. How do we do that? We clear the damp heat. When you actually get rid of that damp heat environment inside your body, the anal area stops being constantly irritated and invaded, and the hemorrhoids will naturally shrink and dissolve over time. That's the real lasting solution, the one that finally puts an end to the cycle. Now, what do we use to clear this heat? Among the many, many botanicals in traditional medicine, thea is one that is almost like it was made specifically for hemorrhoids. I'm talking about the fruit of the pagoda tree, what we call Huai Shi in Chinese medicine. It's the seed pod from the pagoda tree. You know, the tree, I mean, right? It's the one you often see along streets or in parks, the one that has those beautiful clusters of white, fragrant flowers in the spring. The flower is used in medicine too. And the seed inside the pod is what we call Huai Shi, or the pagoda tree fruit. Now, in our classic medical texts, Huai Shi is considered one of the all-time great remedies for hemorrhoids. In ancient times, they didn't just throw that term around when they called something a sacred remedy. It meant it had truly outstanding, almost irreplaceable clinical results. So why does it work? Let's look at its properties according to the traditional system. Huai Shi has a bitter taste and a neutral energy, and importantly, it's non-toxic and very safe. What does a bitter tasting herb do? First, bitterness helps drain fire. It clears excess heat from the body. Second, it helps dry dampness. It removes that heavy, stagnant moisture. So one single herb is already addressing both aspects of damp heat. That's rare and valuable. But there's more. Huai Shi also has a very important ability to cool the blood. In traditional theory, we say that when blood is hot, it moves recklessly. It can burst out of vessels and cause bleeding. And where there's heat, there's also inflammation, swelling, and pain. Why do hemorrhoids bleed? It's because of local blood heat. Why do they swell and hurt? Also because of local blood heat. By cooling the blood, Huai Shi brings that local temperature back to normal. When the blood isn't overheated, it stops rushing around, the bleeding stops, the swelling goes down, and the pain eases. So you see, Huai Shi has three key actions: clearing damp heat, cooling the blood, and reducing inflammation and pain. It directly addresses the three main symptoms we talked about: the damp heat movement downward, the bleeding, and the swelling and pain. So when the ancient doctors used this herb for hemorrhoids, it wasn't just a guess. It was the result of thousands of years of clinical observation and real-world experience. Back then, there were entire families, generations of practitioners who built their whole practice around treating hemorrhoids, and their primary medicine was an ointment made from this fruit. They called it Huai Shi ointment. How do you make this ointment? It's actually pretty simple. You take the dried seed pods, put them in a pot with water, and simmer them over low heat for a long time. As the water slowly evaporates, the oils and active compounds from the fruit are extracted, and you're left with a thick, concentrated paste. That's your basic Huai Shi ointment. You might not find this at your local pharmacy. But if you have access to a good herbal supplier, it's not that hard to prepare. So how do you use it? The main way is externally. For internal hemorrhoids, you take a small amount of the paste, about the size of your fingertip, and shape it into a small suppository, then insert it. I know for many of you, that might feel a little awkward. There might be some mental hesitation, but remember, we're treating a medical condition. This is serious, it's legitimate, and there's no need to feel embarrassed. Hemorrhoids are right there, so putting the medicine directly on the site is the most direct and effective way to get results. What does it feel like when you put it in? Many of my patients tell me they feel a very pleasant, cooling sensation very quickly. The cooling and pain relieving properties start working almost as soon as you apply it. That area that was swollen, painful, and burning, it just starts to calm down. The pain eases, the swelling subsides, and you can almost feel this wave of relief wash over you. It's hard to put into words, but it's a real sense of release. And this method works whether you have internal or external hemorrhoids. If they're internal, you insert the suppository and it acts right on the internal tissue. If they're external, located under the skin around the opening, you just apply the paste directly to the surface. If you have both, you can use it both ways. One suppository inside and some paste outside, and you're attacking the problem from both sides at once. That dual action can speed up your recovery significantly beyond external use. You can also take Huai Shi internally to strengthen the effect. How you can grind it into a fine powder and drink it with warm water, or you can brew it with other herbs as a tea, or even have an herbal pharmacy make it into pills or capsules for easy daily use. What's the internal use for? It works from the inside. from your digestive tract to clear the damp heat at a deeper level. Let me use an analogy. The external application addresses the symptoms, it gives you immediate relief and makes you more comfortable. The internal use addresses the root. It changes the internal environment that's producing the damp heat in the first place. If you combine both external and internal approaches, you're treating both the symptoms and the cause at the same time. You're working from the outside in and the inside out. With that kind of strategy, how could your hemorrhoids not get better? Have you ever thought about this? In ancient times, they didn't have microscopes or chemical analyzers, so how did our ancestors discover such a perfect remedy like Huai Shi? It's because they were incredibly careful observers of nature. They watched the patterns of everything around them. In their minds, the pagoda tree was seen as an upright, honorable tree. It was associated with integrity and righteousness. In ancient times, officials would plant 3 pagoda trees in front of their offices to symbolize the 3 highest ranks of nobility. They believed that the tree's natural character, its uprightness, its clarity, its integrity was reflected in its medicinal properties. Its ability to clear heat and cool blood came from that same pure and righteous quality. Damp heat is murky, dirty, and turbid. Huai Shi clears it out. Like an honest official cleaning up corruption and restoring order to a troubled government, that's the philosophy of taking a likeness, and it's a profound way of thinking about how nature and healing are connected. Now, what if your hemorrhoids have progressed to a more severe stage? What if, when a patient comes in, the hemorrhoid has swollen to the size of a small ping pong ball, or even larger, and its prolapse stuck and so painful they can barely move? In that situation, just relying on the ointment might take a little too long to get enough medication into the tissue. That's when we bring in acupuncture to give things a boost. Here's what we might do. A practitioner would take a sterilized needle and do a technique called pricking, making small punctures in the most swollen part of the hemorrhoid. Why do we do this? Because that area is so swollen, because it's filled with stagnant blood and damp heat that's been trapped, creating a state of severe qi and blood stasis. By pricking it gently, we release some of that trapped stagnant blood. As soon as that pressure is released, the swelling goes down noticeably, and that intense pain often subsides pretty quickly. Sometimes practitioners also use cupping, a small glass cup placed nearby to draw out some of that stagnant blood. After we've done that and cleared some of the obstruction, we then insert the Huai Shi ointment. Now that the pathway has been opened up, the medication can penetrate much more easily and deeply into the tissue, so the effect is amplified. That's the core principle here. If you don't remove the old stagnant blood, you can't generate new healthy blood. Get rid of the old, and the new can come in. And don't worry, we're not talking about a huge bloodletting. We're only releasing a small amount, a few drops to maybe a spoonful, just enough to unblock the stagnation, and it's a very safe procedure. For severe cases, this combination of acupuncture and the Huai Shi ointment, used both internally and externally, has really helped many of my patients avoid surgery. Now, let's get to the big question I know many of you are thinking about. Do I need surgery? Many patients go to a colorectal surgeon, get an exam, and here you're at stage 3 or 4. You've waited too long. Surgery is your only option, and of course, that's scary. You feel like you have no choice but to go through with it, but after the surgery, many of these patients come back to me or share with other practitioners, and they often regret it. Why? Because while the hemorrhoid is gone, they're often left with a whole new set of problems. My personal view is this. For hemorrhoids, if you can avoid surgery, you absolutely should. Let's think about it. The anal area has a very demanding job. Every single day you eat, you digest, and eventually stool has to pass through this opening. If you have a surgical wound there, and every single day stool, which contains a lot of bacteria, has to rub across that wound. How is it supposed to heal properly? It's incredibly difficult. You get into this cycle of inflammation and contamination. Many patients who have surgery find that the wound keeps breaking down. It might look a little better one day, and then after a bowel movement, it tears open again. This can drag on for months, even 6 months or more, and it's absolutely exhausting and painful. What's even worse is that some patients, because of this poor healing and local tissue damage, develop what's called a fistula. A fistula is an abnormal tunnel, a passage that wasn't meant to be there. Instead of having just one opening, the contents of your intestine can start to form a new path through the tissues, creating a second opening somewhere nearby. That fistula can spread along the tissue spaces, and here's something I really need to highlight, especially for my female patients because of the anatomical differences. If a fistula extends forward, It can potentially connect to the vagina. Can you imagine if that happens? Gas from the intestines or even stool itself could pass through the vagina. I'm not exaggerating to scare you, and I'm not joking. This is something that has happened in clinical practice. I've seen patients who have gone through this. And the physical and emotional suffering, the sheer humiliation is beyond what most people can imagine. That's why I always try to communicate this to my patients. Life is good, so avoid surgery if you can. What I mean is, unless your hemorrhoids are truly life-threatening, which is extremely rare. Surgery should be your absolute last resort only when everything else has failed. Hemorrhoids can be completely cured using traditional methods by addressing your constitution and root imbalances with a very high success rate and without the risks and complications of surgery. So why go through that knife if you don't have to? Now, you might ask, doctor, mine are really severe. Every time I go to the bathroom, it's like torture. Will it really work without surgery? Let me tell you, if you have the confidence and the patience and you follow the approach I've laid out externally, using the Huai Shi ointment consistently to manage the local symptoms internally, using herbs that can clear damp heat and promote blood circulation, and when necessary, adding acupuncture to remove stagnation with this comprehensive approach. I can confidently say that there are almost no hemorrhoids that can't be cured. Does it take time? Sure. It's not like surgery, which takes an hour and you're done, but this is a root level approach. It removes the fundamental cause, and once you're better, the hemorrhoids are much less likely to come back. More importantly, you avoid the nasty side effects, things like anal stricture, incontinence, or the fistulas we discussed. When you really weigh the options, isn't that the better long-term choice? Think about surgery for a second. Yes, they remove the tissue mass, and it seems like the problem is solved, but then you're dealing with post-op pain along, difficult healing process, and a whole list of potential complications. The traditional approach, on the other hand, gives you the ointment to soothe and shrink the symptoms. That's the symptomatic relief, and it gives you internal herbs to clean up the damp heat environment so new hemorrhoids don't form. That's the root treatment. This combined approach is what allows you to truly recover and stay recovered. So, first point, the Huai Shi treatment is truly effective. It was so effective in ancient times that some families built their entire legacy on just this one herb, passing it down through generations. Second point, we have to shift our thinking. Often the simplest, most natural approach is also the most effective and the least likely to cause side effects. Don't assume that a complex prescription or expensive ingredients are always better. Sometimes when you use the right herb for the right problem, it can resolve a chronic condition that you've dealt with for years. Now, let's talk about something even more important. Prevention. Traditional medicine has always emphasized treating disease before it occurs. That is, doing the work ahead of time to prevent illness is much more effective and wiser than treating it once it's already happened. The saying goes, preventing illness is better than curing it. If you can adjust your lifestyle so you never develop hemorrhoids in the first place, that's obviously the ideal scenario. We already know that hemorrhoids are caused by damp heat moving downward, so let's think what creates damp heat in the first place. Number one is diet. So many of us are busy, we eat out all the time. And we consume a lot of fried foods, grilled meats, spicy hot pot, and processed foods full of artificial additives. In traditional medicine, these are all considered rich, greasy, and sweet foods that easily generate damp heat. On top of that, many people have the habit of drinking alcohol, which itself is a damp heat producer. If you consume too much of these things, your body will generate a lot of damp heat. So your top prevention priority is to adjust your diet. Try to eat more simply, more naturally, focus on fresh, seasonal vegetables and fruits, and make sure you're getting enough fiber. This will help keep your bowel movements regular and smooth, and this is critical. A lot of hemorrhoid problems actually start with chronic constipation. When your stool is too hard and too dry, you have to strain really hard every time you go, and that pressure engorges and damages the blood vessels around the anus. Over time, that's exactly what leads to hemorrhoids. Second, be careful about staying in one position for too long, especially sitting or standing for extended periods. Many of my patients have desk jobs, and you're planted in that chair for hours at a time, morning and afternoon. Sitting for that long impairs circulation in your lower body. The veins around the anus get compressed, the blood flow is restricted, and that's a perfect recipe for varicose veins and blood stasis, another major cause of hemorrhoids. So no matter how busy you are, set a timer, get up every hour, walk to the bathroom, get some water, do a little stretch. Just get your body moving and your blood flowing. Standing for too long also puts pressure on the anal area, so try to alternate positions and avoid prolonged standing as well. Third, and this is one that surprises many people, manage your emotions. Some of you might think, what does my mood have to do with hemorrhoids? The answer is a lot. In traditional medicine, the liver is in charge of free and smooth flow. That includes moving your chi smoothly, managing your emotions, and aiding digestion. If you're constantly under stress, or if you get angry easily, feel anxious, tense, or depressed, all of those emotions affect your liver's ability to move qi freely. That leads to liver qi stagnation. When qi stagnates for too long, it can turn into fire and heat. Combine that with a weak spleen, and dampness also appears. And we're right back to the damp heat problem we talked about at the beginning. So people who are frequently angry have big mood swings or who live under chronic high stress. They're actually at higher risk for hemorrhoids. That's why, for prevention, in addition to watching your diet and activity, it's really important to keep a happy, balanced state of mind. Try not to sweat the small stuff. Find healthy ways to release stress. When your liver qi flows smoothly, your body won't produce as much damp heat and you'll be much less likely to get hemorrhoids. Now, if you already have hemorrhoids, or if you've had them and successfully treated them, daily maintenance becomes even more important. Every morning after you wake up or before you go to bed at night, take just 3 minutes to do some pelvic floor exercises, what we call lifting the anus exercises. This is very simple. It's like you're trying to hold back a bowel movement or hold in your urine. You contract the muscles around your anus and pelvic floor. Hold that contraction for about 3 to 5 seconds and then slowly release. Just contract, relax, contract, relax. Do this several dozen times. This simple exercise strengthens the muscles around the anus, improves local circulation, and does a great job of preventing hemorrhoids from coming back. Also, after every bowel movement, if your bathroom setup allows for it, the ideal thing is to rinse the area with warm water to clean off any residue, and then gently pat it dry with a soft, clean towel. Try to avoid using just dry toilet paper and rubbing back and forth. That friction can be a direct physical irritant to hemorrhoids and can make them flare up. If you ever feel that tingly, swollen sensation, like a flare-up is about to start, you can also use the dried flowers from the same tree, what we call Huai Shi. Just take a small pinch, brew it with hot water, and drink it as a tea. It's very similar to the fruit in its cooling and blood cleansing properties, and it's an easy, convenient home remedy to help prevent acute flare-ups. You see, everyone, it's not that complicated. Hemorrhoids are very common. There's a saying that 9 out of 10 people have them. And a lot of people think they're hard to get rid of, but when you have the right approach, using the principles of traditional medicine, they really aren't that difficult to manage. I sincerely recommend that if you or a family member or friend are struggling with hemorrhoids, before you make the decision to go for surgery, give traditional medicine a real chance. Try this simple, natural approach. The Pagoda tree fruit isn't expensive, and you should be able to find it at most herbal supply stores. Why not give yourself that option? These medical traditions represent thousands of years of careful observation, experimentation, and accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. In ancient times, they didn't have the advanced surgical techniques we have now, but they did have their own methods, and those methods are often more in tune with the body's natural rhythms than modern surgery. Why? Because these therapies work from the root. They help your body restore its own balance and support its natural ability to heal. Surgery, on the other hand, treats the symptom by cutting away and removing tissue with external force. It's quick in the moment, but in the long run, it can affect your body's overall function. One approach supports your self-healing capacity. The other simply removes the problem. Those two approaches lead to very different results. I often tell my students that studying medicine isn't just about memorizing formulas. The most valuable thing is to learn the way ancient thinkers saw the world. They observed nature, they observed the patterns of health and disease in the human body, and they drew conclusions that are still remarkably applicable today. If you can understand those patterns and adapt your lifestyle and your treatment accordingly, your body will naturally return to health. And that brings me back to what I always emphasize: life is good, so avoid surgery. The deeper meaning is that your body is a sophisticated, integrated system, and we should do everything we can to preserve its integrity. Every organ, every tissue has a purpose. If you remove one part to solve one problem, you might disrupt other related functions and create permanent issues. So if you can preserve it, don't cut it. Respect your body. The fruit of the pagoda tree has been used from the earliest known medical texts right up to today. Its effectiveness has been tested over thousands of years. Think about those old family lineages of practitioners who built their entire practice around just this one herb. They supported generations of families with it. That represents countless successful cases. It just shows that this remedy truly has something special, it's effective, it's easy to use, and it works. I hope this discussion gives you a better, more reassuring way to think about this difficult and often embarrassing problem. Of course, I always have to remind you that everyone's constitution and condition is a little different. So what I've shared today is for your general understanding and reference. If you're dealing with any health concerns, please schedule a visit with your primary care doctor. I'm here to help you understand the science, not replace professional medical advice. The safest approach and the most responsible thing for your health is to seek a thorough evaluation and personalized guidance from a qualified healthcare professional, whether that's a traditional medicine practitioner or a medical doctor, so you can get the right care for your specific situation. All right, we'll wrap it up here for today. In the next episode, I'll have more practical, everyday health tips to share with you. I'll see you then. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.